Well, again, welcome everyone. I'm Hannah Ravani from the Transformational Governance team at the United Nations Global Compact based in New York, and I'm very excited to kick off the session today. Let me just start with a few housekeeping notes. First, this session will be translated simultaneously into Spanish, French, and Portuguese. To activate this translation feature for one of these languages, you simply click on the interpretation button in the control bar at the bottom of your screen, and then choose your language. You will need to also click on the mute original audio button, and also closed captions are available should you need it. Also, happy to note that the recording of today's session, along with the presentation slides, will be shared with all registrants via email within the next few days. And on the next slide, you'll see that during the session, we'll have time to answer some of your questions live, but we'll also respond to your questions in writing throughout the entirety of the session. For your written questions, you may use the Q&A feature to submit your question and upvote the ones you would like to hear answered. You can find this Q&A button in the control bar at the bottom of your screen. Now, I would like to start off on why we're here today. As you're aware, companies are increasingly recognizing the importance of robust anti-corruption measures to mitigate risks, uphold ethical standards, and ensure sustainable operations in response to an evolving corporate risk landscape. However, implementing anti-corruption ethics and compliance programs is only part of the journey to achieving that goal of robust measures. Equally important is the thorough and meaningful tracking and measurement of anti-corruption compliance metrics. So today's session is going to dive into exactly that, the importance of compliance measurement, the associated challenges, helpful tools and methodologies to improving the evaluation of metrics, and some tips on how to harness technology to your advantage. So with that, we'd like to start out from first hearing from you. In a moment, you'll see the instructions to access a Mentimeter poll on the screen. To access this Mentimeter poll, you can either go to menti.com and type the code that you see on the screen on the left-hand side, or you can scan this QR code with your phone, or you can click on the link that's located in the chat. So we'll just give a minute or two for everyone to join the Mentimeter poll, and please do start answering the questions listed there. Again, you can find the link also in the chat if the QR code is not working, or you can go to menti.com and enter the code that you see on the screen. The code is also located in the chat if that's easier for you to access. So I hope you were able to access. If not yet, you can still see the code at the top of the slide. Go to menti.com and use that code there. But we'll go ahead and take a look at the results for the first question, which is, are you aware about the concept of compliance measurement? It looks like the majority of you are aware about the concept. For some of you, this is your first introduction, and some of you are not sure. Regardless of where you are on your journey, today's session will be helpful for you to learn more about the most recent best practices on measurement. So we're very happy to have you in this session. And please go ahead and answer the second question on the Menti survey. Does your company have a compliance measurement system in place? So it looks like the majority do not yet have a system in place. A good amount of you do, and some are unsure. So again, this is the perfect session for you to be in. And I'm sure this will help strengthen your systems in place or help you understand how to implement one and measure effectively when you do. And this is the last question of our opening Menti poll. In your opinion, what is the biggest concern for measurement of compliance in today's workplace? So this is an open response. We really love to hear from you here. So I'm seeing not sure how to start, accuracy, that's definitely a big one. Low capacity, efficiency, data quality, another important factor. Accountability, resistance from staff, transparency. I'm seeing a lot of accuracy, corruption, definitely, confidentiality, knowing what to measure, certainly, modern slavery, more data quality, how to start, buy-in, standardization, the most meaningful metrics to monitor and disclose. Yep. Time, impartiality, and fairness. These are all very important points. Effectiveness, lack of resources, consistency, tracking the efficiency of the controls, not being done regularly, trust. Yes, trust is a big one. Workload, making mistakes, governance. Yeah. We really appreciate you giving all of this input and happy to share that some of these are going to be addressed in today's session. And for anything that's not addressed, we really encourage you to format it into a question, submit it in that Q&A button, or save it for the live Q&A portion at the end. We'll do our best to dive more deeply into these concerns and hopefully give you some helpful resources. Thank you very much for participating in that Mentimeter poll. We're now going to turn to the agenda and get started with today's presentations. So we'll start out with this introduction, then we'll do some unpacking on compliance measurement, addressing a lot of those concerns that were listed. We'll have some company examples from an excellent set of corporate speakers and guest speakers, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end that's live. So to kick off our introduction on unpacking compliance measurement, we'll hear from two presenters first. Happy to introduce our first presenter, Dr. Fabian Espejo, Coordinator for Anti-Corruption Programs on Collective Action at the United Nations Global Compact, followed by Benjamin Marici, Consultant on Business Integrity at the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. With that, I'm happy to hand it over to my colleague, Fabian.
Thank you, Hannah, for your introduction, and it's a pleasure for me to be today here to present a brief introduction about this important topic. So if we can start with the presentation, thank you. So why is it important to measure the impact of the anti-corruption program? Measurement of the anti-corruption program is about judging the quality, effect, importance, or value of the anti-corruption measures adopted. Measurement and monitoring of impacts and progress are essential if companies are to be effective in combating corruption. Why is important monitoring? Monitoring and continuous improvement ensure that the strengths and weaknesses are identified and that the anti-corruption program is continuously improved to remain effective and up to date in addressing changing risks. Only then can companies amplify their success and replace policies that don't work in their context of operation. It's very important to bear in mind that not all policies work for all companies. Often what works in a small company will not work in a large company, and what works in one country may not work in another. So please take into account that if you can measure it, you can manage it. It's so important to have metrics and specific ways to measure the efficiency, the impact, the importance, the value, and the quality of your compliance program. Next, please. So I will show you some good practices for the measurement of the anti-corruption program. One of these is to implement periodic reviews and reports for top-level management as well as external verification. Companies should evaluate periodically the effectiveness of the organization's anti-corruption program and update the program as appropriate. Implement an internal control program to check that the company's anti-corruption measures are in place and effective. And rely on established benchmarks. This benchmarking process facilitates a data-driven approach to improvement, guiding organizations toward best practice and industry norms. Benchmarking is so important because by comparing performance against these benchmarks, organizations can assess their relative standing in terms of anti-corruption measures. Next, please. One of the most difficult things when measuring the anti-corruption programs is to identify the kind of indicators that can be used to measure the anti-corruption program. So we have quantitative indicators, which are numerical data such as training statistics. They can be, the quantitative indicators can be derived from the scope and results of risk assessment. Why is important risk assessments? The extent to which companies use the results of the risk assessment to refine and inform the anti-corruption program are also indicative of the effectiveness of the risk assessment. So an excellent starting point when setting quantitative indicators is to take into account your risk assessment, your anti-corruption risk assessment. Some quantitative indicators ask for data that will help to provide a picture of effectiveness. In some cases, companies may choose to moderate their answer with additional qualitative information. For instance, if you are conducting a training, it is important to take into account the level of satisfaction of the participants, which is a qualitative information. But you can take, for instance, the quantitative data about the number of people trained. And for certain indicators, a binary response, yes or no, will suffice. Next, please. As key recommendations in terms of a measurement of the anti-corruption program, it is important to set clear objectives. When adopting anti-corruption measures, it is important to consider where we are and where we want to go. What are the goals that we have established? So data should be collected continuously. It's a process in which we have to collect the information continuously before any anti-corruption intervention or action is applied to establish a baseline measurement, but also during the implementation of the anti-corruption program. The quality of the data that you are going to collect, it depends in the entire process, not only when you are implementing the anti-corruption actions, but also before establishing the anti-corruption measures, the anti-corruption program. It is important to collect information to have a baseline measurement, to know where we are and to know where we go. So you have to establish clear goals. Collection and analysis of compliance data is relevant to determine whether the evidence supports that a compliance program is working effectively. So, two key questions that you should ask yourself is what metrics and info has the company collected and used to detect any kind of misconduct? Another question could be, against what specific goals or objectives is the anti-corruption program measured? Such kind of questions are relevant to know the progress and the process in which, through which your company is collecting data. Data collection is relevant, but also it's relevant to establish KPIs. While defining goals, companies are encouraged to set key indicators they will use to measure success or failure. An example of KPIs is, for instance, training. The company has a comprehensive training program that has been rolled out across the organization. This is a KPI. So the metric that you can obtain from such KPI is the percentage of employees trained during trained on anti-corruption measures or the compliance program during the year or within a year. So that's an example in which you can establish a clear KPI. It is also important to describe the process in place to undertake monitoring and continuous improvement. That this is not only important for your own company to establish a rigorous way in which you can procedure and process the data that you collect, but also it's important to share such information with your stakeholders, with your partners. Sometimes stakeholders are very important to evaluate the data that you have collected in terms of analyzing the efficiency of your compliance program. So, 3 clear recommendations. First, set clear objectives, goals, targets, establish KPIs to know the key indicators that you are going to use to measure your successful or failure. and describe the process in place to undertake monitoring and continuous improvement. That brings me to the end of my presentation. I therefore now gives the floor to Hannah. Thank you so much, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Fabian. With that, I'm happy to hand it over to our next colleague, Benjamin Ricci, consultant on business integrity at the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Benjamin, over to you.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and also thank you, Fabian, for your very good presentation there, and dear participants, we really value your attendance here. So I will be speaking to, sorry, if you could go to the next slide, please. I will be speaking to a publication that we have here, publication of interest, that's an anti-corruption ethics and compliance program for business, which is a practical guide. And maybe just to give some perspective about this guide is that, it gives very practical considerations on various steps that companies could take to prevent corruption in their operations by establishing effective anti-corruption ethics and compliance programs. And this takes into consideration various aspects and, also very many factors to be considered there. And we have been currently undertaking, we have been having discussions since the first webinar of this series. So FYI, this is just a part of the series that we've been undertaking that is based on the UN Global Compact Management Model. Also, a practical comprehensive tool which helps companies evolve their sustainability efforts, and it comprises of 6 management steps. So basically the guidance on the guide is mostly based on the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, which, being a very comprehensive legal instrument in the fight against corruption, addresses action, with the private sector. And the reason why, this guide was developed is because while governments and states have, vowed to, and pledged to take measures to prevent corruption involving the private sector, enhancing accounting and auditing standards and all this, we realized that states alone cannot fight corruption. So, and companies have a very critical role to play, as allies for change. And this is why this guide came along to guide, companies along the way. And while actions will vary from company to company, the guide focuses on basic common elements that businesses should address. And we will also later give you an update on an update process of the document. So next, please. So in terms of the evaluation of anti-corruption programs, the implementation of these programs should be regarded as continuous learning and improvement process. And as Dr. Fabian mentioned, it should be periodic. But why should it be periodic? And among other reasons here, I would say, the periodic reviews and evaluations, they help to keep policies and procedures up to date and relevant for employees and business partners. And in addition to this, they also help to identify the shortcomings, weaknesses, and opportunities to optimize operations, simplify and overall their anti-corruption program. And as I'll later mention, the review consists of a compilation of information and the analysis of single elements within this anti-corruption program. So for example, an example we could give here is, for instance, if you're doing an assessment of specific processes such as participatory development in, let's say, you're trying to develop a code of conduct on sponsorship. But you might also ask yourself then, what's the difference between a review and an evaluation? And generally, the review will be an in-depth study conducted at a particular point in the life cycle of the program. So it's sort of a reflection, actually, looking at what you've done, what you've achieved, performed, while the evaluation is the analysis of all this, what you've done, sort of a weighing of this. So then you need to consider, like, let's say, the strengths, weaknesses, what you've done, extent to which is it effective, and which brings me, to a point, a very key point that Dr. Fabian mentioned. Evaluations have, clear criteria against which the results need to be evaluated against. And I think this is what we've mentioned as the key KPIs, because this helps you identify the potential need for modifications and improvements. And we'll also hear from some of the speakers today from the private sector who, touch on this. Next slide, please. So then why do we conduct this reviews and evaluations, and also say that they need to be periodic? And generally the rationale is, essentially to determine whether anti-corruption policies or procedures require modification. And these modifications could range from, 1 to 4 reasons that we have currently. Could be introduction of new measures. And an example maybe that we could give here is if you have a new policy, let's say on prohibiting facilitation payments due to the company's extension of its business operations into a new country that is actually known for such payments, then this could apply here. The other reason could be, having additional existing measures, for instance, having additional training courses within the company, or maybe to reduce inefficiencies. For instance, if you have, existing redundant controls. And last but not least, could be adaptation of strategies. For example, if we want to communicate items or news on anti-corruption from the senior management through an alternative means, as compared to emails, for instance, through podcasts or other means of communication. Next slide, please. So then it's also very important to note that these modifications may be required due to changes in the business environment and lessons also that have been learned from the internal operations. And the many factors which could affect these changes in the business environment, this include new markets and business operations. For example, if you need to, within your business, to engage third-party agents, or for instance, you have new business relationships like new suppliers, it could be a new organizational structure. Maybe you have a restructuring and you have new subsidiaries, for example, new performance targets and all this. And also, so companies then would need to, consider that some changes in the environment have an impact on the anti-corruption program. And this may not be, immediately obvious. So, for example, there's countries now that are increasingly adopting actually access to information legislation that allows for disclosure of previously unreleased information, and this affects companies in a different way in terms of their programs. And so, just to go back on the slide, then in terms of then the sources for information or reviews, first here we have results of internal monitoring. This could be of internal practices and including internal controls by the company's management. This can provide extensive information on the overall quality of the program. For instance, if you have a company's anti-corruption training strategy, it could enable the assessment of the number of participating employees, trying to get the perceived usefulness and knowledge. Now, when you have such a thing, there needs to be a caveat here, because you need to really be clear with the objectives and benefits to the employees, because you also don't want a situation whereby they feel like there's a lot of suspicion around excessive control amongst your employees and things like this. So communication is important while still doing this. Then the second thing could be the results of internal and external audits. This provide a very important and independent information basis on how effectively the different policies and procedures are applied, and how they also interact with each other on how synergies can be developed. They also actually this audits also help to review the management's assessment of the anti-corruption program. Then we also have feedback from internal and external parties. This proves it provides very useful information for the review of various policies and procedures, for instance, based on feedback on anti-corruption policies, providing information on internal and external parties' knowledge and understanding of the actual policies. The feedback that's generated by let's say sample-based surveys and continuously motivating employees and business partners to comment, maybe asking to ask questions on the anti-corruption program, then this sort of feedback that you get then constitutes a very extremely useful source of information that cannot be probably maintained through monitoring or audits. Next, assessment of the employee skills, business partners, policies and risks. This also can provide a very comprehensive picture of the various elements of the program. Then last but not least, we have the benchmarks or sort of like comparisons with peer companies in respective industries. It helps you to situate yourself and evaluate the company's policies. And you see such information then can be obtained through either research or reports, let's say from other key stakeholders such as civil society, to just have a glimpse of what's happening in the market. So next, please. So then now, once we've had, once we've used these various sources of information to conduct the comprehensive review of our programs, we can sort of evaluate the program's performance to identify potential needs for the modifications. And the key criteria, some of the key criteria we use here are 3: effectiveness, efficiency, and sustainability. Where, as you can see, effectiveness refers to the extent to which this program, these policies and procedures have contributed to the specific objectives on the programs. For instance, if you're talking about minimization of risks by facilitation payments, for example, then efficiency would be refers to minimizing of costs of the program, the anti-corruption program, while still ensuring that the benefits of the anti-corruption policies and procedures are still there. Then last but not least, sustainability, which is referring to the extent to which this anti-corruption policies and procedures and their results help to minimize the risk of corruption in the long run. Next, please. So then in terms of just getting sort of an overview of a picture of where you lie, and remember, this is very basic, rudimentary, like something you can do. So in cases where the evaluation shows that some program elements do not meet the expected results, then senior management and oversight bodies can make a decision on the various improvements. And here you can see the major elements of the anti-corruption program being reviewed and evaluated against the criteria. So you just use this to mark this out. And so then the improvements could be, for instance, a review of the internal controls could show that the controls are effective and sustainable because they address the risk appropriately and are well perceived by employees. But then also at the same time, it could show that the results could show that it's becoming very expensive and redundant in a couple of the aspects. And then therefore a conclusion could be like the internal controls should be decreased and can be replaced by something that's more resource efficient, just in terms of making the optimization of the program better. Next slide, please. So then begs the question, once you're done with this, then what do we do next? And whenever a review or evaluation is taking place, then companies should consider like 2 follow-up options. The first being the opportunities for improvement of anti-corruption policy and procedure, being identified and implemented to further increase the effectiveness. So then the successful implementation of the improvement opportunities need to become part of the next review and evaluation cycle. Then also, significant improvement opportunities can be determined in conjunction, of course, with the internal and external partners. The other thing is the communication. Then, so in this case, the results of the evaluation can be communicated and discussed with employees and shareholders as part of also demonstrating the ongoing commitment of senior management to this program. And this is something that will also be discussed actually in an upcoming installment of this webinar series later on in the year, and we shall mention this to you. Then the other question, who's responsible then for implementing these reviews and evaluations? Essentially, it should be senior management who would be ensuring the conducting of regular reviews of the anti-corruption programs, to, evaluate the best course of action to address modifications, including the reduction of the inefficiencies within the system, then they need to communicate this aggregated results and recommendations to the board of directors. Then the other person responsible here being the board of directors or any other equivalent body, could be like an audit committee. These now need to evaluate and approve the chosen course of action based on the information now that they get from the senior management. And by the way, then the board of directors could also ensure that evaluations and reviews are carried out in predetermined intervals. They can, for instance, initiate ad hoc reviews and evaluations, in cases where there's possible violations and allegations within the processes. And so in the next slide, we will see the challenges and opportunities which are there for small and medium enterprises. I think it's very important for there to be an understanding from SMEs, and I know we might be having a couple of them here, that the anti-corruption program is, it's not a one-time activity, but an ongoing process. And so this really requires an ongoing commitment, including provision of sufficient resources from senior management, board of directors, to ensure that the program is applied in day-to-day activities and kept up to date in changes to the business environment. And then also, as SMEs may really face financial and time constraints, evaluations that are conducted, may rely predominantly on feedback and documentation, since practically speaking, these are sources of information that are more efficient, could be less costly for them, they work better within the environment. Then another consideration could be like SMEs could also conduct reviews and evaluations on the basis of preset goals, and then compare the performance against them. That's also one of the ways in which they can go around this. Then reviews and evaluations could also be conducted in the form of a risk, a more general risk assessment, taking advantage of the synergy between the two activities, the reviews and evaluations. Then SMEs should also clearly understand that a thorough and periodic review and evaluation can contribute significantly, not only to their effectiveness, but also to efficiency, and in the long run then result in reductions in the cost of the overall program. Then the issue about it being really expensive to an SME becomes a less of a problem for them. So with this, thank you so much for giving me your audience, and I will now hand over the session to our moderator for the next session. Anna, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Benjamin, and thank you for the great takeaways of your presentation. And good morning, everyone. My name is Ana. I am the Chief Compliance Officer at Aegea, which is a Brazilian big private sanitation company. I also serve as member of the advisory board on anti-corruption collective actions at the Brazilian Charter of Global Compact UN, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm very honored to moderate this important panel with my colleagues that will share with us their great experiences. And to start, we can ask them to introduce themselves. So I will start with Samantha, and then Mr. Yao, and then Peter, please.
Thanks very much for that, Anna. So hello, everybody. My name is Samantha, and I'm the Managing Executive for Vodacom Group Compliance and Financial Services Risk. My background is predominantly in legal risk and compliance. I've got more than 25 years of experience in having set up compliance functions across various sectors, financial services, now telecommunications. The purpose of why I'm talking to you today, part of my mandate and portfolio includes the anti-bribery and corruption program, as well as financial crime. And further to that, I'm currently a co-chair on the Brazilian B20 Forum and contributing to the Task Force on Integrity and Compliance. I look forward to having an engaging session. Over to you, Anna. Thanks.
Thank you, Samantha. Mr. Chow, can we get to you now?
Thank you, Anna. Hi, I'm Yao here from Malaysia, country in Asia. I'm the managing director of Durian. Well, what do we do? We actually it is an engineering consultancy firm where we design and of course look at the engineering design of construction and also built environment. So as we are in the industry of professionals, we look at integrity of professionals as well as also ethics as an essential to our industry. So today, why we actually comply to the anti-bribery management system, because in our industry, we really look at it as a very essential, important part of our industry. And in fact, today I also speak on behalf of the SMEs, the small and medium enterprises, where our company is at about 80 staff, and how do we, as an SME, comply to the various compliance measurement as well. So nice to meet you all, and looking forward for this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yao. And Mr. Peter, please.
Good day, everyone. Peter Jonker. I'm based in Switzerland. I'm an independent consultant, and over the past 2 decades, I've supported many organizations with the implementation of compliance programs. So I provided training, set up programs, dashboards, managed hotlines, and conducted investigations. What I hope to share today is the observations that I have in working with organizations who actually struggle with the implementation of measurement programs for their compliance programs. So it's not going to be textbook, but more the perspective of what I observe in working with many companies as well as international NGOs on this area. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So, excuse me, I'm taking the Mr. and Mrs. off and just calling you by the names. So, Samantha, if I could start with you. We wanted to know, how is anti-corruption compliance measurement situated within your company's broader risk management framework? Can you share some of that with us, please?
Sure, thanks for that, Anna, and for that question. So I think first I would start off by saying, Vodacom Group, we have an unwavering commitment to conducting our businesses as well as our global activities with integrity. We maintain a steadfast stance against any breaches of financial crime, which includes bribery and corruption, and also the laws and regulations that apply to our business and the transactions that we undertake. We have a zero tolerance to bribery and corruption, and this is a testament to the commitment of our ethical conduct that we run. Now, consistent with this is we have developed a robust anti-bribery and corruption program. And this includes, amongst other things, an ABC policy, as well as the associated standards that go with it. And this is predominantly to manage our legal, regulatory, and reputational risks that are associated with bribery and corruption. And what has been quite important for us in the setup of this program is that we adopt a risk-based approach that is also proportionate to meet both our legal and regulatory requirements that are imposed upon us. We operate in various jurisdictions, and this becomes quite pertinent for us, is that risk-based approach and what is proportionate. It's whilst we set the standards and the frameworks, it's not necessarily one size fits all. In saying that, and how does this fit into the broader risk management framework? Our ABC program, or anti-bribery and corruption program, actually aligns with our overall enterprise risk management framework. And the enterprise risk management framework, which we have in place, it provides guidance on how we integrate risk management into, our specialist areas of risk management. And this actually then covers detailed risks related to anti-bribery and corruption, or bribery and corruption. I think further what we have done is, compliance risk and financial crime, which is made up of anti-bribery and corruption, anti-money laundering, and sanctions, are distinct tier 1 risks under our enterprise risk management framework. And further to that, anti-bribery and corruption is a tier 2 risk, is a specialized tier 2 risk that we've identified. I think what is also quite important for us is how we conduct the risk management process for anti-bribery and corruption. And here, this is set out, we use the risk management process that is set out in the ERMF, or Enterprise Risk Management Framework, to conduct our risk management process for anti-bribery and corruption. And the first part there is we have to make sure we understand the context and the scenario and what we are actually dealing with. And thereafter, we move on to an identification process. And this basically enables us to identify new and emerging bribery and corruption risks to be captured. And this we do either periodically, or we also do this through the ad hoc raising of risks on an ongoing basis. Now, all of these risks that we have identified, actually what we then do and the related information, we store this and maintain it into a dedicated risk register. And we have a platform, which is called one of our GRC platforms. We store this in there. Now, our GRC platform and the risk register that we've done, this serves as a comprehensive reporting repository for us. And this makes sure that this enables us to have easy access and efficient management of the risk data, which is also then what we then do is capture it into a standardized, risk library. I think what is also quite important, and the colleagues have mentioned this earlier, is measurement of compliance measurement. And part of using the risk management process that we have set out in our ERMF becomes the measurement of risk. And this is because we need to make sure that we assess all our risks consistently to ensure that there's equal comparison and prioritization. And we use a risk rating criteria, allowing for the management of our oversight committees to focus on the most important bribery and corruption risks that we might face. I think the third thing that is quite important as well is how we manage that risk. And here it becomes extremely important to ensure that our response to the identified risks or potential risks is proportionate to the defined tolerance that we have set, as well as where we've identified a risk or potential risk as a priority. At minimum, what we then do is we assign a risk owner, we capture mitigating actions, we manage the risk, we set the risk tolerance statuses, and we define also any risk action plans that are required to bring us back into the tolerance level. I think the other point that I would also quite make, and this was raised, it's very important, when we measure the risk, we look not just at the qualitative aspects of it, it's also looking at the quantitative aspects of what we need to actually measure. And this gives you a more objective view of the risk and brings much more focus into that. And linked to this is what we specifically have in place is key risk indicators. I see the colleagues are mentioning KPIs. Your key risk indicators and your KPIs become a key component in how we actually measure our ABC risk that we actually face. I think lastly, what is extremely important for us that fits into the wider risk management framework is the assurance activities that we conduct and our oversight from our various governance as well as management committees that we actually have. And basically, there's a number of various ongoing assurance activities that we conduct. And I think lastly, it is quite important is then the reporting that goes back into the governance committees so that our boards, have a line of sight and in terms of what is it, in terms of the risks that we are actually seeing from a bribery and corruption perspective. So now I'm going to pause there and hand back to you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Samantha. And yes, risk-based approach is always successful, but some companies struggle in talking about it openly. We will get to that soon. So, Mr. Yao, how is the topic of compliance measurement pursued and implemented by SMEs?
Thank you, Anna. Now, in the context of SME, especially in my country, the perception and implementation of compliance measurement are still at the early stages. Now, currently, I think compliance is largely voluntary in my country, which means that adoption and adherence vary across businesses. But however, I think there's a noticeable shift driven by government agencies and professional bodies in Malaysia, especially within the engineering practices, where we look towards promoting compliance requirements, in particular in relation to ESG considerations. Now, one of the primary challenges faced by SME in implementing compliance measurement, I believe earlier, I think it has also been mentioned as well in the earlier slides, is the allocation of resources in terms of cost and manpower. So compliance can often require significant investment, especially for SMEs like us, both financially and in terms of time and expertise as well, which can be sometimes burdensome to smaller enterprises with limited resources. Now, for my practice, as I mentioned earlier, consulting engineers, there is actually, fortunately, there's a recognition of the importance of adhering to global compliance standards. Now, in this regards, I think bodies, international bodies such as the International Federation of Consulting Engineers, FIDIC, the WFIEL, the World Federation of Engineering Organization, they provide valuable reference points for ensuring that engineering practices align with international recognized compliance benchmarks. So this not only help SMEs like us to navigate the complexities of compliance, but also enhance the credibility and competitiveness for us domestically, and of course also for us to venture into global markets. Now, moving forward, I think it's just a suggestion. I think SMEs should continue to build the awareness and capacity around compliance measurement. I believe this may involve leveraging available resources and also expertise through partnerships or seeking guidance from the industry associations, both domestically or even internationally. And of course, also exploring innovation solutions, which I believe later maybe we can also hear from others. Innovative solutions to streamline compliance processes without imposing excessive burdens on our limited resources. And additionally, I believe there's also an opportunity for governments and also regulatory bodies, especially professional regulatory bodies, to provide support mechanisms tailored to the need of SMEs, especially the professional companies, facilitating their journey towards sustainable and also responsible business practices. So this is my thoughts on the perceivedness and of course the implementation of compliance measurement in SME. So thanks. Back to you, Anna.
Thank you, Yao. And yeah, it's important to take the steps and keep going. So I'm heading to Peter now. Peter, could you describe any specific challenges you have seen within business implementing and maintaining anti-corruption measures?
Yes, happy to. First, maybe two observations. One, it is a very sensitive topic because we have now had two speakers and we had some textbook presentations of what you should do. But when companies start, and I think there are also a lot of SMEs who are just starting to come to terms with the idea, it is a sensitive topic to address, and not everyone is at the same page. So you find a lot of compliance officers struggling with how am I going to address this. Of course, we agree on the principle, but then coming from intention to action is a big step. Wanting to know if we do have corrupt practices is a tricky one. Being transparent on what we found towards the external stakeholders, for instance, is another big step. And I think that's an important one. A second observation I have is, and that is an important one for measuring as well, is that corruption and fraud are intentional acts. So irrespective of all the effort you do with policies and controls and awareness and what have you, the people who engage in corrupt or fraudulent practices are very well aware that they are violating some rules. And they will do everything to keep it in the dark. So the question for measurement is then also, how big is the iceberg really? What part of the iceberg do we see? Is the number of cases that are being reported, is that indicative of what's going on? Is it good to have a lot of cases, or is it bad to have a lot of cases? That's the kind of interpretation that companies struggle with as well, I think. So you don't know what this iceberg underwater look like. And of course, there is this intention, and of course, management wants to make sure that we don't get fined, that we don't have reputational damage or something. But implicitly, very often the message is, go with God, come back with money. So if we don't know that you have to pay 10% to secure this deal with this government contract or something, then it's all fine. But then we're still in the paradigm of if it's legal, it's ethical, right? Another big question, I think, is also how to interpret the results. Not everything you can count really counts. So we see in defining KPIs quite regularly that companies are trying to come up with data that they can produce. But is it really relevant what the case closure time of an individual case is? And what does it tell you if it's 40 days or 30 days, if you don't have more than hundreds of cases? Because what does this KPI then actually tell you? Is it not more the qualitative aspect you should evaluate? So not everything that counts, or which you can count counts. Another bigger issue, and that is a very, then I'm going to wrap up, issue that I see is that now companies are measuring input and output. I have so many FTE, and with that, and budget, and with that, I have created so many trainings. But what is the outcome and the impact? Because this is where we're moving. You want to understand what the outcome of this training is. 80% of the staff did that training. And now what? Did they make better decisions? How are you going to measure that outcome or the impact? Are we a less corrupt organization? That's the kind of questions you need to consider as well. And these are challenges I see when companies trying to operationalize the effect, measuring the effectiveness of their programs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. And yes, the bigger the company, the bigger we struggle also in measuring the effect of all that in all the employees. Going further with more pertinent concerns here, Samantha, in today's workplace, we have also concerns regarding data privacy and evolving regulatory landscape. How does your company safely navigate the compliance measurement field?
Thanks, Anna. So I think, when you look at how we actually look at the concerns that come through the changing regulatory landscape, your data privacy, etc., I think what is most important, and not just, for anti-bribery and corruption, but just generally, you have to actually understand your business products, your business, your products, your services, and your stakeholders, including your customers, suppliers, and third parties. That becomes a key component or the basis, of understanding how then do we navigate through the landscape. I think what secondly is most important thereafter is once you've understood your business requirements and your customers, etc., it is understanding your regulatory requirements, understanding the regulatory environment, and also what are those obligations that are imposed upon you. And thereafter, you have to take on a structured approach, if I could say that to you. And what becomes important is you do need to develop then the formal policies, procedures, and standards that are required. And key for us thereafter is to train your employees and your relevant stakeholders then on what you have now established. I think what is also quite important in some of the lessons learned that we've had is to make sure that you also make sure you have accurate record keeping. Becomes quite key. And then the last one, which I do know sometimes becomes a challenge, in quite a number of our programs when we run the ABC, is that we're very good on the advisory component, and perhaps on the embedment. But what we do need to do is to monitor compliance proactively to identify any possible non-compliance that you would have. And your assurance activities, can range from various types of assurances that you can do. And this can look at, you could get certifications, you could do a compliance review, you can rely both on internal and external audits, management oversight if you have that in the first line. I think also what's important is looking at self-assessments. And I think where we have evolved to, just giving you some color on us is we have implemented what we call continuous monitoring programs. And we are using currently data analytics and some of the newer technologies, such as optical character recognitions to review contracts, to pick up some clauses, and moving away also from, a sample base to making sure where we can test a whole database, for example, the whole population. So I think, as we move forward and as, we get more mature in this environment, a lot more focus will be on the use of data analytics and the newer technologies on robotics, to help us to monitor and, manage these issues that we would then see in terms of navigating. But key is also that regulatory environment and understanding the requirements that are imposed upon us. So I'll hand back to you. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you very much, Samantha. What I'm seeing in companies also is a lot of people from technology entering the compliance areas so that we can manage all those changes. Heading back to you now. What example do you have of an instance where some weakness was identified in the compliance, and how did you address? Can you give us that example?
Yes, can, Anna. I think some of the weakness identified during the compliance, for example, the lack of compliance engineer, and of course the lack of enforcement officers in SMEs especially, because as I mentioned, resources are limited. So that's one. Second is also regarding the awareness. I think awareness, especially in SMEs, I think throughout the world, including just now during the poll, the awareness of compliance measurement is still at the infant stage. So when you talk about compliance to our staff or even our engineers and so forth, so it is not being done in the same situation in SMEs in other companies. So when you talk about SMEs, we are very confined, and then of course the awareness and the resources are limited, especially in this country. And third, the weakness is of course also the external influences, especially when we want to actually carry out the compliance measurement. We deal with external parties. So when we deal with external parties, sending surveys and so on, so there will be also some hindrance, because the external parties or even the parties that we deal with do not actually have awareness of compliance measurement and of course compliance requirements. So we do have also weaknesses where we need to deal with external parties, especially in terms of compliance measurement. So these are some of the weaknesses that we identified during the compliance review and so forth. Now, to address these strategies, we actually have also a look at it, and a few things that we would like to suggest, and of course some strategies that we'd like to share as well. First is of course the company itself, SMEs, need to have a comprehensive awareness campaign to educate our employees about the importance of compliance, and also to foster a culture of volunteerism in terms of like having the compliance engineers as well. Now, one of the key things my company did was also to actually have a compulsory training in terms of our compliance measurements and so forth. And of course also in some companies, we also know that employees are rewarded for actively participating in compliance related activities, enhancing their sense of responsibility and commitment to the adherence of compliance management. The second thing is of course also to address the issue of SMEs. We know that we have the lack of specialized expertise within our company. So what we do is we do appoint external parties, external consultants and experts outside of our company to assess the compliance gaps, and of course also provide tailored solutions to us especially the SMEs. So additionally, I think certain internal compliance tasks were also outsourced because of the limited resources to streamline processes and, of course, ensure the comprehensive coverage of the compliance measurement. And last but not least, maybe this strategy would be interesting enough because we recognize the continuous learning and development as per mentioned earlier. So we really need to engage associations or institutions or even organizations like United Nations Global Compact, where they provide training resources and, of course, facilitating participation and, of course, providing webinars for us to enhance our compliance practices and also align ourselves with the international standards and best practices as well. Okay, so this is just some of the strategies that we do, and hope I answer your question, Anna. Thank you.
Yeah, it sure does. Thank you very much. And I'm sure a lot of people hearing us will think about that. And as you were saying, I was also thinking that even in mature countries, this is very cyclical. We have to, from time to time, go back to the importance of everything we do. And I think Peter can help us with his experience here. So Peter, what is the effect of a business ensuring that it has good compliance systems internally? For instance, we have people wondering whether this even makes a difference to the company's bottom line. And I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Thank you. It is also one of the questions that many compliance officers have to deal with. Basically, the question management asks, what is the business case? Show me, prove me why I should invest more in your department. And I think to some extent, this is the wrong discussion. This is a bit like a horseless carriage syndrome. We try to name the old or the new in terms of the old. Like the first car was called a horseless carriage. You try to come up with new requirements to be compliant and work ethically and improve corporate integrity and what have you. But you still want to have a financial metric next to it that rationalizes. As a result, the compliance officer will try to explain that. He will, or she will say, it is good for our staff motivation. We have less staff turnover if people are proud to work for this company. So we don't have recruiting costs what you start to calculate. What if we are blacklisted? What kind of revenues do we miss? And then the CEO might argue, yeah, sorry, but if we pay 10%, we can secure the deal. And if we don't do it, we don't have a deal. So we don't have revenue. So where are you now? And you're having the discussion at the wrong kind of level. Because it's not about if it's legal, it's ethical, and if it's illegal, but we get away with it, we can also still do it. That's the wrong discussion, I feel. But quite regularly, the compliance officer needs to bend over backwards to convince management, who is still in this other paradigm, I would say. The one defense you would have then in that situation is, I think, you have a better defense when you're in court, if you have a strong compliance program, because your fines, at least in the US, will be lower when you have an effective compliance program implemented. So only from that perspective, it is a better defense for you as a company, and also a better defense for you as a CEO if you have to have ring fenced and took everything. And this is a scary one as well, because now there's also the first court cases coming where compliance officers and C-level are being held accountable for not doing enough to prevent non-compliance from happening. So if you are a compliance officer and you're looking at jail time because you're violating a UK Bribery Act standard, then the SFO says, well, you did not do enough to prevent fraud from happening. You do have a different kind of, maybe also profile, and it might be more difficult to find compliance officers as well. But in short, the defense you will have in court when the proverbial shit hits the fan is better when you have a stronger program. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Unfortunately, when we talk about court, it does make an effect bigger than when we talk just about integrity, and hopefully this changes in our landscape in a few months or years. There's another thing that I would like to add, which is compliance is different from assurance. And the market is always thinking that we assure many things that as a compliance officers, we just can't. So I think we can have another whole panel on that. We can get back to the Global Compact US. But going to our next questions here, Samantha, how do you evaluate the performance of third-party vendors and partners regarding to anti-corruption compliance? Then again, in a compliance view, not assuring, but in a compliance view.
Yeah, so thanks for that question, Anna. I think that's quite an interesting question. And I think, before I respond on how you evaluate the performance, I think it starts, prior to that in terms of evaluation of an existing vendor partner that you've onboarded. I think before establishing the relationship with the third-party vendor or partner, it is critical that we conduct an ABC or anti-bribery and corruption risk assessment to classify right up front or risk rate your supplier or your partner than it. And depending on that classification that you get, right, you will then conduct the appropriate level of due diligence. Now, either this will become a standard due diligence or an enhanced due diligence. And this is important to do it at the establishment of the relationship, because then it actually goes through. Now, where you then pick up any red flags that are picked up, you need to basically escalate, you resolve those red flags identified during the due diligence that was conducted. And you also need to understand what are those controls that you need to put into place to manage the risk on an ongoing basis. I think what is also important is, as part of this onboarding due diligence or risk assessment that you have done, is you need to decide whether you want to actually continue with the relationship or should you actually continue with the relationship? Should you actually take on the relationship or even continue with the business with the third-party vendor or partner? I think also what's quite important when it comes to the evaluation, and this is at the start, is to make sure you have the relevant anti-bribery and corruption contractual clauses are included in the contractual arrangement or any subsequent contract renewals that you might have. I think the other point that I would also make is make sure that the payments are in accordance with the services that are provided and the contractual terms and the monitoring of the services provided by that party. Now, once you've done that, you can then look at the evaluation thereto. And this is really where we are looking at the monitoring and the partner or third-party supplier's performance. And here you look at the services rendered against the contractual arrangement. You look at the payments for the services rendered. Is this actually proportionate, to the services being rendered? So is that payment for that service, is that proportionate? And then I think also what's quite important is maintaining the documentation to verify the services provided by these third-party vendors as well as partners. And I think also what's quite important for me is monitoring and documenting any material changes in the nature of the risk profile of the third parties. I think you also got to make sure that, when you evaluate the performance of the anti-bribery corruption program, you need to make sure you have an understanding of the third parties' ABC program that they have in place, right? So what is that? And that in turn, you can do that even at the establishment of the relationship, especially where, you are finding some red flags and then there's a continuous monitoring that has been done on that. I think the last point that I would make is, you have to implement, depending again, and I go back to the word, your risk-based approach that you have taken and implemented is just making sure that, if your suppliers have been rated at a high risk, for example, they are being monitored on an ongoing basis. And then in line to that, in response to certain trigger events, if they've got a change in the legal status, for example, if there's been an acquisition or merger, you go back again and then, you review that partner from that perspective. So I trust that has answered your question and happy to add in anything further if need be, but I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Samantha. Yeah, I see ourselves now as really partners with companies that we don't really want, but sometimes we have. So making a difference in your business partner is part of our jobs now. So yeah, from the lens of an SME, how do you see large companies measuring third-party compliance? Any tips you could give to a SME when it comes to answering to large clients on compliance measurements?
Thank you, Anna. I think so. I speak on the perspective of SME. I think just now Samantha spoke on the perspective of large companies. So I think we normally expect SMEs are the third-party vendors to large companies. So I think we always think that the third-party compliance can seem to be daunting, particularly when considering requirements of compliance and of course like vendor registrations to large companies. So I think in our perspective, I think large company looks at the compliance in a few ways. One is of course the ESG compliance, because in our country, large companies increasingly actually prioritize ESG, of course, environmental, social, and governance. So when they assess, they will actually assess the third-party vendors in terms of ESG, and one of the key criteria is of course the governance. So this includes the governance practices, and of course the compliance, and of course the implementation of like what Samantha has mentioned, the ABC program as well. So that is one of it. Second is of course a lot of large companies do have vendor registration requirements, and which I believe the vendor registration requirements includes the compliance with, like, for example, various regulations and standards requirements, and of course also how the SMEs or the third party demonstrate adherence to like industry-specific regulations, quality standards, and ethical guidelines as well, especially for professionals like us. So these are the two things that we always look at, especially the large companies look at the SMEs in our region as well. So I think well, we look at the large companies measurement to the SMEs. So perhaps also I think just now you mentioned about what are the tips for us SMEs to effectively respond to the compliance measurement. So maybe the first one is of course SMEs like us. Of course we have to start small and build up the policies. So by establishing clear and concise compliance tailor-made to the business operations and industry requirements first, and we focus at the start on addressing key areas of concern, such as risk assessment and of course the ethical business practices in our industry. So what we suggest is starting with manageable policies allowing for gradual implementation and refinement over the time. So that is our suggestion, especially for SMEs. In fact, for our company, we just started, I think, a year ago. And I believe this is just a start, and we need to refine. And in fact, hearing to the two speakers just now, there are a lot of improvements that we can do to the compliance requirement. Now, the next one is, of course, SMEs can also maybe look into or consider implementing like integrated management system, where we streamline compliance requirements and, of course, demonstrate comprehensive adherence to various standards and regulations as well. So by having an integrated management system, it includes like quality, environmental, and also others, and including the compliance requirements as well, into a cohesive framework. So this actually enhances the efficiency, especially for small companies, but also facilitates easier compliance monitoring and reporting to us in the SMEs. So these are some of the tips that I'd like to share to audiences here today. Thanks, Anna. Yep.
Thank you very much. And Peter, help us here commenting on third party, as well as all the changes you have seen with your experience when we talk about the compliance ecosystems. So if you could give us thoughts on both the third party sessions and importance of all that, and also the various changes in our ecosystems here.
And then with the letter you refer to data analytics and AI and what have you. Well, I'm not an IT specialist, but going back to the third parties, it's really important that we have support of IT systems and databases. And at the same time, you have to be critical about the quality of the data that you're buying from those suppliers. Because are you really sure that these data are okay? And I've tested it, and sometimes it's really scary that the data that you rely on are not true. So it's yeah, you have to be critical there and remain. But IT is needed. We do need it for not only for third-party due diligence, also proactive transaction monitoring in the financial sector, for instance, that you already have your flags. And it was already mentioned that the system already helps you to flag shady kind of or suspicious activity, and that is very useful. Now on AI, that is a new bigger thing that we have to come to terms with, because it can be very powerful, very useful also in investigations if you have to go through huge amount, terabytes of data, and you have already your AI tooling that helps you to write the right kind of algorithms to make queries to those data or to observe already patterns in the data. That is very helpful. We need to want to understand what actually happens there. In the compliance community, I see people, well, okay, we want to do something on data privacy when we talk about AI, but I don't see a real interest to think about data ethics. So what if you're an IT company and you're developing that app? What kind of data are you using? It's not just talking to the data privacy officer or with the authorities on that. It's also about the decision to build something like that. What kind of rules what kind of code, so to speak, do you use to develop new technologies in your organization? With small startups, this is not happening. Google and stuff, they do have their data ethics policies as well. And they also have large court cases that probably triggered this policy. But we have to think about that. And then we are at another observation. Legal and compliance people find their confidence in rules and regulations, in laws, in policies, and that's what they're good at and refer to. With those new developments, and they could be sustainability related, but they could also be AI related, we need to think about making the right decisions. And how do you make the right decision if the legal framework is not there? The EU thought about an AI Act, so everyone is busy. There are CSRD, so CSR, the new Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive in the EU is a relevant one. Everyone's jumping on the bandwagon, but yes, what decision do you need to make as an organization when that law or regulation is not there yet? Helping organizations to make people in those organizations to make the right decisions, even when there's not a regulatory framework or a policy yet, is exactly what the compliance people also need to train the organization for. So we are already years beyond comply or die, and this is the policy, and if you understand it and comply with it, everything's okay. We need to help people make better decisions. And if you don't have the policy and if you don't have the regulatory framework yet, then still, how are you going to help the people to make the right decisions? And I see a role for compliance there as well, which is difficult because their safety is basically in the rules and regulations, and they're not there yet. So this is an interesting field, and I think we cannot avoid it as compliance officers to not look into, to ignore it, to not look into it. We have to pick up that challenge, and I don't know where it's going. And I saw examples of AI as well, where I think, whoa, this is scary stuff. Let's not. But you could argue a tool, a system is more consistent in making a decision. If you bring a case to an AI robot that makes a suggestion, he or she is not biased by the color of the eyes of the person asking that request. It can also take into account the other decisions that were taken. But if that AI starts to think of what the norm is in 5 years, so now it's we have seen a big wave of Me Too in organizations that led to many more cases that are being reported. But it's also a societal shift in what is acceptable or not that we're facing. AI could anticipate that and could say, well, in 2 years' time, it's not appropriate anymore to make that remark. What do we think about that? We need to make that decision and think about what is happening if we start to apply that in our decision making as well. And these are real big challenges, and I don't have the answer, and there are no silver bullets as yet. But yeah, I'm very much interested to also hear questions and thoughts from the audience here. Thanks.
Perfect, Peter. Thank you. And what I see here from the audience is that AI and KPIs are the most wanted topics here for us to talk a little bit more. So I would like to head it back to you, Samantha, giving your final thoughts, and if you could share with us a little bit more about your KPIs or KRIs, as you've mentioned before, and let us know if you are already using AI in your compliance system.
Yeah. So thanks very much for Anna for that. So I would start with the latter. So there's two things that we've implemented, across our compliance programs, and specifically on the anti-bribery and corruption program. We've got a risk control matrix, if I could put that, where we set out all the controls that you need for the implementation of an ABC program. And what we did, one of the challenges that was posed to us is we are a technology company. And whilst the business was running ahead with technology, compliance was not where we wanted them to be, if I could put that clear. So what we actually then did on the controls that we've had, we have used data analytics, we have used robotic process automation, as well as optical character recognition, to use and test some of the controls that we've created as part of the risk control matrix. So, for example, looking at contractual clauses for our suppliers and our vendors. So using the OCR capability, we can actually test and move away from a sample of, for example, 25 or 30. We can actually test our whole database that we have, the whole population of our supplier contracts, to make sure those clauses are in. So we have built, I think, across our program, we had about, I don't know how many controls, there are about circa 16 controls. Of that, we have automated and using analytics, circa about 9 or 10 of those controls. We actually use the newer technologies in giving us comfort that those controls are in fact working. Now, in saying that, it's not everything that you can use the technology for. So we do rely again back on normal assurance activities that we conduct. And then just moving on and away from, and then the other one that we are busy at the moment is actually looking at transaction monitoring, of our suppliers, and looking at their buying, the patterns, the payment patterns, etc. So that's something that we are doing. But just moving back into, I think there's a lot of questions, again, as you've mentioned, on KPIs and KRIs. And I just want to say, it hasn't been an easy journey in determining what are the right KRIs and what are the right KPIs. It has been a trial and error, if I could put that to you, in terms of where we are. So I'll give you a few examples that we have in terms of KRIs. So, for example, is the number of investigations that was conducted on anti-bribery and corruption. Second one is looking at your speak-up line or your whistleblowing line and determining the number of whistleblowing cases that were related to anti-bribery and corruption. The other KRI is, and I think the colleague mentioned, is in terms of the training stats. So we look at the training to determine, we have a rule that more than 90% of our employees and our non-employees need to be trained on anti-bribery and corruption. So that's a KRI that we use as a measurement tool. The other one that, and I'm very happy to share more of this, on another forum, but the other one would be is making sure that all the suppliers that we have onboarded, due diligences have been conducted on them. We look also at the time as when that due diligence was conducted. Was it done after the supplier was onboarded, or was this done prior to the onboarding? So I'll just pause there, because I think, I can give you a lot more, but I'm happy to, share some of this as part of community to you that you can share then with the audience. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Samantha. Yeah, final remarks here, and obviously if you have KPIs or KRIs to talk about, please share with us.
Sure. I think for KPIs, as usual, we are a small SME, so we rely much on, like, for example, the numbers of reports reported by our third party or external parties, our whistleblower policies as well. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, mandatory training for our staff in terms of compliance measurement. And of course, also, we have a pledge by our staff and engineers that we pledge on the anti-bribery requirements and of course program. And of course also the vendors, we do have like a vendors compliance as well that we actually adhere to as well. So final words, I believe we will continue to improve the compliance measurement. I've heard also on the AIs, perhaps time for SMEs also to look at AIs to complement what we have now. And of course also continue to have awareness among our engineers and of course the SME industry as well on the anti-bribery. And of course the last one, of course, is to continue to participate in UN Global Compact programs to enhance our knowledge in this compliance measurement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Xiao. Peter, your final thoughts here, please.
Yes, I'm happy to. I also glanced through the questions a bit, and you see what people actually want this checklist with what are the right kind of KPIs there. They're not there. There's a lot of wrong stuff as well. Of course, the number of cases that are being reported tells you something, but things get meaning in a context. So I would advise use benchmark data as well to compare it. Your own companies, but also larger database. At least you have something to compare it with. When it comes when it is about the cases, of course you can make breakdowns, but it only makes sense if you have a lot of cases, so more than hundreds of cases. So for most organizations, that's not relevant. But you do want to know what type of cases you would have. And if you're still in the process of qualifying that as an organization, then look at those operationalizations like you find in the ACFE's studies, for instance. So the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners with the report of the nation. There you can find a breakdown. If you use that one for yourself as well as a definition, then you can compare your scores with those in the next year. Substantiation rates, I think that's one to mention. So what percentage of cases that you receive through the hotline do actually have substance? That is a qualitative indicator for you as an organization because sometimes people call a hotline because it's too hot in an organization, right? Because the air conditioning doesn't work. That might very well be a compliance or a health and safety issue, but still, if people are calling your hotline for the wrong reasons, then the substantiation rate tells you something about do we get the proper kind of caseload to deal with. Well, the picking up on Yao's point on the pledge, it's also interesting to implement a compliance confirmation next to an integrity pledge. So not just asking your senior managers or line managers to pledge that you will comply, but also to confirm after a year or something that last year you did not see any violations and can confirm that if you did see and witness things, that you actually followed up on it properly. This is not only giving you the confidence, and it's a moral reminder for the manager, but it's also helping senior management to ring fence a risk. Because if the line manager in that division, for instance, oversaw something funny, or he put it under the rug, it might help you also as a senior management to defend yourself. Well, we asked it, there was nothing. Now we conclude there is something. So either you didn't do your work properly, or you lied to us, and then we do have an issue. So these are ways to also build on basically internal control that you already have that can also help you to improve the program itself. And then there's a lot of cultural kind of assessments, like employee engagement studies. Do you feel comfortable reporting? Those kind of questions, and I trust many people have conducted those cases. Here, from a practical perspective, I think it's interesting to also ask the question, not just, do you feel comfortable? Because if you ask a question like that, people will say yes, of course. But if you ask the question, would your colleagues and peers feel comfortable to address that? You will see a huge difference because I of course feel happy to speak up, but my colleagues are less comfortable. So you can play around with those things also to learn a bit more about how people are actually feeling. And then, of course, there's the business relationships that you have terminated, the contracts the sanctions that you've discussed, people that have been being reprimanded or kicked out of the organization. These are also KPIs you should monitor, and that are also indicative of an effectiveness of a program. I hope this is helpful.
Yes, very helpful. Thank you, Peter. We are running a little bit late, so I will thank Peter, Samantha, and Yao for this great experience sharing, and I'll hand it back to you, Benjamin. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna, and our panelists for this very, insightful engagement. We're all really learning a lot. We work in this sector, but of course, there's no really limit to learning. So thank you so much. I've been looking at the comments and the engagement online, and it looks really good. So I think we can stop here for now in terms of the panel discussions, and we now kindly request to move to the next slide as we discuss some of the key resources and some updates from our end. First of all, we have a new publication. So last week, the OECD Global Anti-Corruption Integrity Forum happened. So OECD being the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And during this event, we launched WE being UNODC, being the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, the UN Global Compact, and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development launched this new guide that's under the name A Resource Guide on State Measures for Strengthening Business Integrity, being a guide to, essentially provide states with a framework for identifying and implementing an appropriate mix of sanctions and incentives for encouraging business integrity. And this phenomena, you may have heard this being referred to as a stick and carrot, basically where it's punishment and reward to encourage business integrity. And I would encourage you all to have a look at this publication. This is an update to a 2013 publication that was initially made by UNODC. It has lots of key insights there, and this will really be beneficial to you over the years, as we also explain why. In the next slide, you will find also, okay, there was an interesting question about, how old is this guide that we're referring to for this session. So this publication, this guide was also from 2013. So this question was very timely. And of course, since 2013, at the launch of the guide and the convention as a whole, for instance, the number of state parties to the convention has increased from 167 to 190 currently. And the space has been dynamic, with shifts in political, technological, and economic environments. And so we are working on the development of a new guide that will feature new perspectives based on the current day happenings to be more helpful for us. And along this, we have already conducted a couple of activities related to this. We had a panel discussion on evolution of corporate anti-corruption programs, and this was held during the private sector forum at the Conference of State Parties, the last event that happened in December last year. Also, we have done a gender analysis of the 2013 publication to sort of understand where we lie. And as per the next slide, you'll see that we've also had a panel discussion on we've had a panel discussion on gender dimensions of business integrity. And alongside this, we've also had discussions on setting up or kicking off a think lab with companies on business integrity that will essentially help us to update this guide as we go along. We definitely understand we cannot work alone. We have to have collaborative efforts in order to develop a better publication. Then we also have an update that's currently happening on an e-learning tool that we're developing. And when the time is right, we say here early 2024, and of course, compliance enthusiasts will ask whether this is actually quite measurable. But yeah, so later on in the year, we are launching this e-learning tool, something that would be really helpful, especially for businesses, as you endeavor to better your best in business integrity. And also we had a call to action, which was essentially a call from businesses to governments to enhance the fight against corruption, which was presented during the Conference of State Parties last year. And as a follow-up to this, we had over 500 signatories to this. And the plan is now to do training for the state parties, with the eventual goal being the enhancement of business integrity. And last but not least, we have upcoming sessions. I have seen some elements of this already being mentioned within the chat as we go along. Whistleblower protection in business. We will be holding this webinar on the 16th of July this year, followed by the role of communication and reporting in ethics and compliance, taking place on the 10th of October. Don't worry if you don't remember these dates. This is just FYI. We shall send you reminders, and we hope to see you there. And last but not least, we really thank you, for your engagement today, and we kindly invite you to share your feedback with us through scanning this QR code, and a link can also be dropped in the chat for you. I really take this opportunity to thank all of you so much for making time for this event today, and to all our panelists and to our moderators. We really thank you for your engagement. To fellow presenter, thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all the best. And from UNODC and UNGC, it's a very big thank you, and hope to see you next time. Please give us your feedback. Thank you so much.